Super, David Osborne. What's the funniest joke or gag that you have seen in an animated film?
For me, and this is a personal journey that we're going to about to go on, it was Tom and Jerry. And it was when I was very little. I mean, I loved Tom and Jerry as a kid, and there's a whole big story around it. This is why I ended up in animation. I loved that whole thing of Jerry outsmarting Tom. And there was one gag in there that even now, if I watched it, it would make me laugh. Tom is pursuing Jerry, and he whacks him with a sort of iron frying pan, and they've got a fabulous sound effect. Bang, 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 and you think he's got to be dead. And when Tom holds the frying pan up, all you see is like Jerry pulling a face at him. And I just loved that. It was just a whole thing, he's like, so, as each time he'd hit him, he'd actually pulled a little face that Tom would have to look at when he'd sort of looked at the front. I mean, the whole construction of it is just, and it made, as a kid, I just found it, I just thought that was brilliant. I just thought it was really funny. What about you?
I've just actually been reminded of it, a scene from the Penguins of Madagascar, where you've got the villain who's voiced by John Malkovich, and he's trying to threaten them. He's trying to threaten them on a Zoom call, and he's got the glasses on. He said, I have you now, and I will be victorious. Where's the button? And he's trying to click that. I said, no, the button's at the bottom. But oh, hang on. And he puts the glass on. Oh, go. And it's so relatable. It's so funny. Every time, every single time, he said, no, now we can just hear you. We can't sit. Oh God. But it's every like supervillain trope that's just flipped on its head, and it's so relatable. It's so funny. It just breaks the whole thing, and then they flip back into it, and then it's supervillains and heroes and everything like that. But that cracks me up every time. So that's the funniest thing I've seen in recent years. But yeah, all the rest of it, oh my God, too much, too many funny gags. And that's what leads us to our discussion this week, which is comedy in animation.
Hello, and my name is Dave Osborne, and I'm a director, and I've been directing for some 30 plus years. I directed Super Team 4 and a show with plastic bricks. I think I can say the name these days, Lego, Nexo Nights, and I also have directed a number of Mr. Bean, the animated TV series.
Impressive. I am Stuart Evans. I have been a director for 26 years. My biggest show has been many hundreds of episodes of Bob the Builder, and I've directed 17 series in 2D and CG, which have been on Netflix, Disney Plus, all the main broadcasters. And yeah, still loving it. Still loving it. Still looking for the next big thing.
Okay, anything, I'll do it.
anything. I'll do anything. Yeah, window cleaning, all that sort of stuff.
I'm going to ask you the question: do you prefer visual humor or verbal humor? And we are talking in animation, of course.
My personal preference would be for visual humor because it is a visual medium, and I do tend to the broader comedy because I'm very basic and a bit silly, really. But I do prefer the physical comedy, the slapstick, because I enjoy setting up a gag and getting that timing. It's the precision of the timing with a physical gag that I really enjoy, and you can get all the expression, the posing. There's so much that goes into it. So that's my preference. But verbal humor, I will always enjoy wordplay. Always enjoy wordplay. So, and how about you, Dave?
Well, like you, I've certainly enjoyed my fair share of visual humor, and the sort of shows that I've made in the last few years. There has certainly been a lot of visual humor to play around with, slapstick, sometimes quite sophisticated visual humor as well, little sight gags, sometimes very big things that need a lot of setting up for a payoff. Sometimes going towards violence as well. Some of the things that inevitably. But yeah, like you, I enjoy verbal humor. I enjoy the sort of banter that you get with a couple of characters. I enjoy that characterization type humor when characters know each other very well and you get that kind of interplay. I quite enjoy that. Like you know, I came into animation because it was a visual form of entertainment. And going back to the Tom and Jerry bit, you know, I was 5 when I first watched a Tom and Jerry cartoon, at a Christmas party that where my father worked. They used to have for the kids, and they showed them on 16mm projector. You know, this is obviously in the late 60s, so it's a long time ago.
1860s.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, absolutely, yeah. Does seem like a long time. No, it was the swinging 60s. It was the 1960s. I think, you know, for me, one of the great things, I sat there and watched all this fabulous. First of all, it was in color. We only had a black and white TV at home, so it was all in color. And you had all of this, you know, interplay of the two characters visually. I mean, it was all visual, and I just thought it was amazing. And I decided there and then I wanted to make animated films. It's as
Wow, from
simple
there.
as that.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the best inspiration right there, isn't it? But yeah, go on.
You know, I think you know, visual humor for me is a very strong connection even now. If you sit and watch a film and it has some visual humor, I engage with it. I do enjoy it. I know it's not everybody likes it, and I know that some aspects of visual humor is perceived, which is I think something we might talk about a little bit later on, as being simple or being kind of easy. I don't think it's easy. I think it's quite
No.
difficult to do. I think it's really, to get it right, it's really difficult.
Yeah, the apparent simplicity of the physical humor, and of course, if you've been working with Mr. Bean, working with one of the great modern day clowns in the best possible sense, have you found that you have to exaggerate it a lot more because of cartoon, or you keeping it more to the human level? Because as we know, if you have human clowning, you have to exaggerate it. When you get into the cartoon realm, you have to push it, so really exaggerate it. So are you having to push it even further than the original would have been?
I mean, I think the performance that Rowan Atkinson gave in the original live action is very broad. We've, you know, working with the animation side of that, you've certainly got a strong platform. The transition perhaps isn't as big in some respects as you might imagine, but there is a transition. I mean, one thing I became very aware of when I first watched the live action, with the mind of knowing I was then going to go on and direct the animated versions, was that the live action bird moved from A to B, and there's a lot of moving around when you watch the Bean, whether it's live action or there's a lot of motion. There's a lot of coming out of doors, walking downstairs, going to a front door, opening a door, coming through, greeting somebody. There's a lot of big physicality things that you have to deal with all the time, which to a certain extent are storytelling, and you have to look about how you get something out of that. And I noticed in the live action that Rowan Atkinson often you did a lot of that with facial expressions, that you'd see the face and you'd see the scheming going on and what was going on in the brain through the facial expressions, and that would help lead you to wherever it was going, whether it was a gag or whether it was, you know, just something simple like answering the door or picking something up. But by the time that conclusion was made, you knew. So that was something I was very conscious of when I came to the animation, that I looked to see how I could transcribe that facial animation, that thinking process into the character as he moved from A to B. And I think that was part of the visual humor, because you are watching him all the time in a way that I don't think you necessarily watch other characters, because there's always this aspect, whether it's the live action or the animation, what's he going to do next? You know, he's off the wall a little bit. He always does things slightly different. He has his own approach to life. You know, if he's going to open a can of beans and he hasn't got a tin opener, he will come up with a solution that's very kind of, the word we use usually is crafty and clever, and you know,
Yeah.
and so I think there's that aspect of how you build that, you know, that visual language, that visual humor within the storytelling.
So with that particular show and that particular character, it is, the comedy is throughout. It's not just getting a setup, not setting up a gag, which is another one of our subjects. How do you set up a gag? it's the whole thing, the physicality of him literally walking across the room is funny because he's putting that performance in. So it's not just that you can hit an extra gag when you get across there, and he's doing something crazy with all his butter in a knife, or he's holding the toast above the butter, and he's rubbing the toast across the butter or something like that. It's that is the whole show is almost a continuous gag, isn't it? Really.
It is a pure sort of comedic storytelling process that we go in, and they are, when we make them, for me, they are certainly like puzzles that you have to solve. They're all little bits and pieces. You get the script and eventually the board. There's a lot of things that you're resolving all the time to make it all lead to one place. There are what I would describe. We do go to big set pieces. There was one thing that we did in a previous series where I still really find it makes me laugh when I think about it now, and it makes me smile at least. That he's bored, he's waiting in the car, and he's having to wait because he's been told to wait by Mrs. Wicket, and he just having tried the radio, there's nothing that he wants to listen to. It's the news or something boring, and he's like umming and ahhing. And you're watching the boredom, and a lot of it, as we just described, there's some facial expressions and the gestures that he's making, and the way that he's going to, perhaps trick something, and he, touch something, and he just starts to hum. And that begins, he finds he's entertaining himself. And that becomes the whole thing. It's sort of he starts to hum, and I think it's Colonel Bogey that we used, and he then begins to play the car, and he's kind of switching the indicators and the lights, and then he starts on the doors, and he's humming the whole piece. And we shot the whole camera working away around the car at different angles, and he's doing this all to the music, and it all builds. It's probably 1 minute. It's probably 1 minute, and for me, it's very funny. I hope the audience find it funny. And it climaxes with him sort of opening and closing both doors, and there's a big sort of satisfied sort of sigh, and he kind of feel you, and you get that moment. He's entertaining him. Time must have passed. He checks his watch, and it's literally as it's literally only like a moment later, and you realize he's still got to wait longer, and he just, there's a massive sigh, and I've done all of that, and I'm still got ages to wait. The whole boredom thing that we'd put in the car, that was sort of leading to that moment, really, because then afterwards he gets out of the car and enters the building. But it always has to have a logic to it. It has to be a reason. There has to be a motivation behind it. For me, in those sort of stories.
Well, you have to know it shouldn't come as a surprise that the character is doing something like this, because you've set up the character. They always have to, if there is something funny, it's got to be in keeping with the tone of the show, who the character is, and it shouldn't, unless you are playing it for that super effect with the, as I said, with the John Malkovich, and like switching, suddenly the villain is ridiculous. Even with the visual or verbal being is limited dialogue anyway, so wordplay is not right for that. Leads us into the basis for humor and how we use it, and with what you've just described, that is very much comedy of the familiar. So the audience would say, "Oh my God, I've been bored in a car. I wish I'd thought of that." And they will be doing that next time they get in a car. And the stuff with John Malkovich on a Zoom call, you go, "Oh, you do that, and you're engaging the audience." And that's the comedy of the familiar, and just giving it a little tweak, and you're just bringing that in. But there's the comedy of the familiar. There's Schadenfreude, which is the biggest thing with slapstick, and like with Tom and Jerry, you're rooting for the mouse, and that the cat is going to get it in the face at some point, but he's going to recover, and it's working out with a show that actually we've both directed, strangely.
That's happened more than once,
You,
actually, isn't it?
yeah, it has happened more than once, worryingly so. And yeah, but knowing that when I was constructing gags for this, or writing out the script, the gag filled script, I knew that I could get away with a lot more because I knew that the that the hero was a small child, and the object of all this violence and embarrassment and just general mayhem was a father figure, a parent figure, a figure of authority. And it's always been the case, like from the earliest days of slapstick commedia dell'arte, like the live action, and from the 16th, 17th century, it's always been pricking the balloon of authority, and the little man laughs at the big man. And if you're seen in a position of power, if you can be brought down low, then wow, that's where you put yourself up on a pedestal. I'm going to knock you down. That's funny. So the whole laughing at that, but also we've got the safety net of knowing that in animation he will get, well, this was good because he was a robot, so he wouldn't be hurt. But you are suspending disbelief. It's not live action, so you can get a pan in the face, you'll fall off screen, you'll get up, and you won't have sort of multiple contusions and be bleeding all over the place. But dang, it's fine, and you move on and you just carry on, and that's how we can excuse all the terrible extreme violence that we can tend to put into these things, because that's a like the human condition is to laugh at authority, to bring them down so we can actually cope cope with life.
I mean, to sort of look at that thought also with another sort of perspective. I certainly when we do the Bean shows, but also when I've looked at other forms of humor in other shows, a line of point where you think, is this a possible gag or is it an impossible gag? And I mean, that phrasing comes, I believe, from Buster Keaton, the silent movie star and sort of founding father of visual comedy and humor and storytelling within that medium, along with people like Charlie Chaplin and Harold Lloyd and Laurel Hardy. The That thinking is, for example, in some worlds, especially when you're doing perhaps, like the show that you're describing, Arpo, as I believe that's still what it was called, isn't it? Arpo.
It is available on Disney Plus still.
I don't know what I mean. When I was doing it, it was still finding its feet again a little bit, I think, and I don't think I took it as an extreme as you perhaps took it in terms of that side of it. But for me, the possible gags are, is if you fall off the wall, it could be funny, but you will hurt yourself. It's if Wile E. Coyote falls off the high cliff, there's a puff of smoke at the end, but he's back in the next shot. In a way,
Yeah.
that's an impossible gag. And I think that the example that Buster Keaton demonstrated he used was that going to hang up a coat. You could hang up a coat on a real nail and it falls off the wall, and then you pick up the coat and you think, oh, there's no more hooks. So he draws a hook and then puts the coat onto the hook, which he's just drawn, and that's an impossible. That's a cartoon gag in that sense. So I think
Yeah.
in terms of when you've got those worlds, that is something I think does come into it, and it's something I think about a lot when I'm sort of working on the action adventure shows where they've got comedy in there. It's what defines it. Tex Avery was certainly a lot of impossible gags. You'd have like in King Size Canary, them sort of drinking the sort of elixir or whatever and growing bigger and bigger until the size of the world. So I think that's but it's funny, but that's part of the rules of the world, and you have to set that up within the film or within the character or whatever it is. You have to make that, and the audience have to perceive that as well. They have to understand, because if you suddenly did something like that in perhaps a something that was more realistic in terms of its approach, I think that would throw the audience and they'd begin to question what else that they were seeing. So I think that's, for me, is something I try to look at when I'm making decisions around what I think will work visually.
Yeah, you have to follow the style, and yeah, the further from reality the style is, the more you can actually get away with this. So I like having the freedom of shows like that where we say, yeah, you know, we can do whatever we want because we've established that, and we've set out early that this is, you know, anything can happen in the next half hour. I can't remember what that show was, but that I live by that with many shows, which will bring us back to the wordplay and the scripting and funny writing. That is an absolute skill, and some people have got it, and some writers really do not, and some writers can try very, very hard, but if you haven't got, as they say, funny bones, then it's really not going to happen as much as you try. They're pitching it too young, and they're used to like the younger humor, or and you say no, you have to push it. Think of your audience. Think it's got to be smarter than this. It's got to be snappier. That's the thing, is the speed for me with some of the humor.
I mean, clever wordplay. I think, yeah, I think you do have to have the writers that can do that, or you have to have performers that can also bring it in the actual sort of performance and bring something in. You know, I think with most things, the majority of things that I've worked on, you know, they are script led, so you are looking for it at the script stage.
There's knowing the characters that you're working with. It's knowing the structure of the world and what you can get away with, but it's also in the writing is developing the characters and making them into or having humorous traits, not necessarily, well, he's the funny one, he's the dull one. It's just getting further into that character, and you do that as you develop a series. You just bring the characters up. You say, and you get the added depth, and you say, no, these are very two-dimensional. There's more here that we can have. He's the villain. He's a good guy, but there's areas of grey, and they can sort of step out of their very rigid roles and then come together and have like a little bit of personal interplay, like almost as if they're stepping out of their roles, have a little chat, and you know, a bit of banter, and then step back into the broader stuff. But that's something that you find as you get further into a series. But as you said, with the when you get a good actor, and we talked about this in the last one with the casting, when you get a set of actors or one actor who is naturally funny, who can give you a fantastic read from literally 3 words, and once a writer hears that sort of performance, and then they can write to that, so it's just sort of a back and forth. There's a symbiosis, I believe, of knowing what that actor is capable of, knowing that you don't have to over egg it in a script. You can just give them something, and you know that they're going to bring extra amount of humor. And I've seen that in a read with where we very rarely had 4 actors in a room, and they bounced off each other, and it was so much funnier than the script. Most of it we couldn't use because it was absolutely disgusting, but what we could use was absolute comedy gold, and we went so far away from the script. The basic idea was there, but we knew that we could use the script as a base, and we just leave it to the actors to just bring their extra performance and bring that comedy that wasn't necessarily there on the page.
Yeah, so I mean, in sort of summing some of that up, you know what you're saying is that, you know, you need a good character created at
Yes.
that series Bible, or, you know, on the script page. It needs to have an idea around it, whatever it is, whether it's, you know, a robot that looks after a small child, or whether it's a man who lives in a house, you know, where he's got a landlady who lives below him and everything like that. You need a scenario and characters that have got some depth for all of that to come out, for the writers to work with something. You know, it has to be
Yeah.
there. And obviously the processes that we're working on a television series where multiple writers, and so everybody comes with a slightly different perspective. I think the other thing that I think is useful in developing dialogue relationships is to look for double acts. I mean, I think double acts are a very useful device. Even if they're temporary ones, whether it's within one story, and if there's some definition about the characters, then that them coming together will create some friction or comedy, opportunity for all of that. I think it's regular double acts are quite difficult though, because that can be something that you think I've really got to give enough depth here in terms of the characterization and the ideas that we can keep digging into these two characters and finding new ways for them to sort of clash or whatever it is that it needs to be done to work.
Yeah, and I don't know about you, but when I'm briefing writers and animators and everyone else who's working on it, when we have a character, and what we'll have in the Bible, we'll give the basis of a character, and it may be quite long, the character description, and everyone thinks they've got a handle on it. I will always give them an unseen, unheard, unwritten backstory, which will involve multiple relationships that you don't necessarily see on screen. So there's going to be and writers and board artists as well. They love this because it adds an extra depth that they can put in, and humor will come from that. You can say, well, I'll tell you what happened about 4 years ago. This one stole his car and it wouldn't give it back, and then they both went to court. And but you have this weird backstory, and sometimes it gets quite racy at times, but it just adds to the depth, that stuff that the audience won't necessarily see, but that leads to ideas for the board artists, for the writers, whoever is constructing the story, and also for me. And we can just push this humor. It just feeds the machine of, right, what opportunity have we got for bringing in humor, and it just expands the characters, and especially with even with just regular slapstick. Yeah, that there does have to be a reason for it, or otherwise the gag won't land, the comedy won't land if there's not a reason, even in animation. So there has to be a reason for it.
I mean, that's interesting, your idea about sort of briefing into board artists and animators a sort of backstory that doesn't really exist, in order to give motivation and perhaps a context of why two characters or one character is at a point where they are in that point in the story. I haven't done that, actually. I must admit, I haven't done that with board artists. I may have done that perhaps with animators, but where I have done that is often with secondary characters at the voice record, when you've got an actor who's coming in and perhaps only got perhaps 2 or 3 lines, and maybe they're reacting to something,
Yeah,
and I'll
yeah,
give them a little bit backstory. Oh, look, you got up late, and the kids have been a real pain, and you couldn't get them to school, and I would often sort of create, like you described, a little kind of
yeah.
mini backstory for them, just so that they could walk into the line with things that kind of shape where they are at that particular
Yes,
moment. And I
yeah,
think that's, I
definitely.
mean, for me, that's why I was doing it. And to give them a place to go as a character and create,
Mm.
something. So they knew that perhaps, if they had kids, they were a mother or a father, any of those things that they could just latch onto and build onto in terms of ideas.
Yeah, especially as actors, they're given that very immediate performance, and that is absolutely useful. But with acting, so when we come to the acting, what are your opinions on use of the fourth wall, which is the wall between the performers on screen and us, the audience? There's the fourth wall. Do you break it? And what are your opinions on that? The look to camera,
Yeah,
that's the big one.
I have thought about that, and I'm trying to think if I've ever done it, and I I'm not sure. I may have done it once or twice in some of the action adventure shows that I've worked on, when perhaps there's been a moment where, perhaps there's a comic character who's about to sort of face something that's probably like, well, you as the audience, you've known that this was going to happen all the way through, type thing.
Yeah.
And you know, and have that little moment of looking down the line at the camera. It's not something I do personally or look to do. It's not something that, it's not in my little arsenal of devices that I use when I'm sort of working on a visual or something, you know, visually humorous or whatever. It's not something I naturally go to. I've certainly had characters look down the line, but no, it's not. So, is this something that you've done a lot of? You're going to tell me it is, aren't you?
You have to use it sparingly. Otherwise, you go, oh God, looking at the camera again, and the audience is not invested in it. They think, oh, okay, I'm part of it, but you have to use it very sparingly, and it has to feel natural with the action. It has to feel natural with the character. I will always use it with particular characters, and other characters you go, no, they would never do that. They would never involve the audience, because it's that sort of, you're with me on this, aren't you? It's I was inspired by, in the use of that, by Laurel and Hardy, by watching that, and just to see when Stan Laurel would sit there for 2 minutes peeling a boiled egg, and you go, oh, I can't believe that I'm watching this, and it would go back to Ollie lying in the hospital bed, and he's just watching him, and then he just looks at the camera and say, can you believe what we're all sitting through this? I'm here, I'm having to do this, and so are you. Can you believe this guy? And I think occasionally it just brings you in. And that, such a fantastic gag. If it's very sparing and used at exactly the right moment, it's really. Mm-hmm. But it has to be, as with so many things, it has to be used sparingly. If you use it all the time, it loses the effectiveness. So you have to, with all the construction of humor, all the sight gags, and the wordplay, the repetition of a catchphrase or something like that. You have to know when to use it, and you can overuse it. You go, so okay, I can't do that. You've blown it. That's no longer funny, because I know you're going to do that. I know this is when you're going to have the look to camera and the breaking the fourth wall. But yeah, it can be seen as a pretty cheap shot. But if you put, I know that's what you're thinking, but you can, but for me, in the right show, at the right instance, and sparingly, you can do that. But you could, I mean, but it's used in live action. You've got the whole thing with Fleabag. That was
Yeah,
that was the camera. That's
yeah,
involving the audience, and then stepping back and say, yeah, it's me and you. Can you believe? Yeah.
yeah.
And we're back in the scene. So it's something that is widely used, but you have to use it sparingly. But
I mean, I
I'm a
think it
fan of it.
works personally. I think it works best for certain. I mean, the double act thing that you mentioned, the Laurel and Hardy,
Yeah.
when you were beginning to describe, breaking the fourth wall, my thinking was Morecambe and Wise, because I remember, Eric Morecambe
Yeah.
doing it as well, and then Miranda Hart very famously, credited, breaking the fourth wall was something that she'd picked up from Morecambe and Wise, So
Yeah.
for me, it would probably depend on the character, and maybe I've just never had characters or worked with characters that perceivably would do that necessarily. I wouldn't.
Mm.
I wouldn't. I probably wouldn't do it in Bean for lots of reasons.
No, that yeah, you have to get it. You have to match the tone of the show.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely, definitely.
So thinking about other things and thinking about how setting up construction of a sight gag. How do you go about it? It's a big subject. You go.
It is a very light subject, but it's, again, it has to be to do with the situation, the character, the pacing of something. I mean, of the show that we both worked on was sort of sight gag to sight gag, and I pushed it with one show where it was just a succession of gags set up, and again, as you said, working within the universe and what can suddenly appear. Can you suddenly have a cliff appear, or suddenly sort of bring out a frying pan from the magic back pocket? Can you do that? It it's setting up, and a lot of this with sight gags is there's an expectation. You can lean into the expectation of the audience. You can say, right, the frying pan's coming out. I know someone's going to get that in the face. So it's sometimes it's how long you make the audience wait for it. Sometimes it can just pull it out, bang, like that, and put it away, and it's very very short setup. Or you can bring it out, and it's the stealthy creeping up, slowly raising the frying pan, and then they get hit by something, and the frying pan just drops. So it does depend on the tone of the show and the timing of the show. That's the thing with setting these things up. It's making sure that it works within the tone of the show and the characters, and also the timing, which is that's the biggest thing is the timing. So everything links in. Sight gags such as you have sight gags on Family Guy, and that leads into the timing. So the timing on Family Guy for setting up sight gags is just in, is infinite. It just goes on for minutes and minutes and minutes, and or they can just play it over and over again. And I feel it is to do with the timing and the expectation of the audience. It's that there's so many. I put this on the list of something to talk about, and I hadn't thought about it properly, so I'm just winging it now. So I'm just sort of moving down the list into timing.
Well, okay. Well, let me breach the pair of those things in that
But
case.
if you can bring it back, please do.
I can breach.
Rescue us, help us, Mr. Osborne.
I can breach both. Setting up a site gag and timing, because one of the things, I think there's two things in my head. The audience are either in front or behind the character that you're working with. So when they're in front, they know he's going to be hit with the frying pan. When they're behind, it's a surprise to them. And there's a difference. There is a difference. And like you described, pulling out quickly and, whacking across the face before you've had a chance to even perceive it. That laughter can often be as a result of partly shock by the audience. It's partly a reaction in terms of their shock that that's happened. Yeah. Whereas, the long setup where he's sneaking down the corridor, whatever it is, and, whacks him and whatever, and everybody knows what's going to happen and the expectation. I mean, one of the things that I've done on certain shows is, a character will run out of a room and so, he's in a mad panic, and the camera's just left on the empty room, knowing, he's left something behind. And then I'll play with the audience and see how long I could. The moment I leave it slightly too long, the audience now know he's going to come back. But it's how long I can play that, how long, and how he comes back into the room. Whether it's kind of nonchalant sort of, oh, of course I forgot that, or comes in like all of a panic, arms waving and everything like that. And you can get that sort of laugh out of that moment. One of the things I was taught about comedy is that it's rhythm, not pace. And by that, it's even like if you're timing out an action and you're doing it, like in a traditional way. When I was young and you started with a bar sheet and you worked anyway, you worked on bar sheets that were sort of basically from musical notation. You could work out and think, on every 12th frame or every 24th frame, I'm going to have the character hit this point and hit this point and then hit this point, and you would plot out your action. You would give it a rhythm, so the audience then have that expectation. They begin to feel that rhythm in it, and so that you can then play with it, and it's all looking okay. And bang on that, third one, you could then change that thing. And so I certainly would use music when I'm doing sort of plotting out and planning. sort of in the animatic stage. I would lay, with the editor, we'll lay music in that sort of gives us a rhythm to work to, so that you get these little moments building up to a little beat. And funny enough, that really does work. That really does help. So I think covering both of those points, you
Very
could
nicely.
you can go from where the audience is, what their expectations are, and to do that, you need to use formulas like rhythm and that sort of approach to sort of allow the audience to have that expectations or know where they are meant to be as well.
Yeah, it's and also you saying this is something that I haven't covered on this list is you saying when someone leaves, I found that there is so much comedy, and producers love this because it basically costs nothing. If you have sound effects, very, very, very extensive use of comedy sound effects. If you've got someone who hurtles off screen, and as you said, he just walks off screen, and you can have, and he could be gone for 20 seconds. If you leave it to the imagination of the audience, if you have plate smashing, cutlery going everywhere, cats yowling, car alarms going off. You can do everything, and that is so much funnier than showing it. As directors, we have to know how we're going to play that gag, whether it's going to be purely visually or is it going to be oral? Is it everything going to be off screen? And how are you going to play the music? And you have to brief the composer and say, okay, I want the expectation here leading up to through these rhythmic beats up to here, and then you stop. Then I'm going to have a sound effect. You stop everything. So again, it comes back to the we are visualizing it. It could be the very like a few words on the written page in the script. You say, okay, I know we can put a fantastic gag in there, pulling on all the tools that we have, the visual, the oral, the music, the sound effects, everything, and the timing. We know that, again, that's part of our job. We have to bring the extra element and tie it all together.
I must admit, I totally agree. Sound is really important, and your
Yeah.
description of what how you work with it. I mean, as one editor a long time ago said to me, sound is 50% of the story. It's just not 50% of the budget.
That's
And
very true.
and
Yeah.
and many a day I've sat in that final mix, and you've gone, do we have XYZ on the in the library? Is there a little kind of something that we can just pull out to use to define something? Maybe it's a character picking something up or whatever it is that just helps take the audience in the picture where we need them to be, because that helps to make the gag or whatever it is work.
It's sometimes quite difficult showing when we have an animatic, so a timed out storyboard that with sometimes with dialogue that we have to play to producers, execs, whoever demands to see it and keep a check on we're actually doing something, and then we have to do it, and they say, right, okay, well, yeah, okay, I don't get what's going on. And you have to explain, you have to say, right, here's where the music leads up and then it stops. And then off screen, you have the sound of a frying pan. And that's the gag. He said, but I'm not seeing it. So, yeah, because it's not finished. It's not finished. It's finished when all the sound is on, the music is on. That's when it's finished. Believe me, you have to trust me on this. You have to trust me, because this is a sound and vision feast that we are making. It's not just the pictures. If it was a silent movie, but yeah, okay, we can do that. And we have to temper everything accordingly. But as you say, there is so much humor that you can bring with the music and the sound, and that is absolutely essential. So I will always insist on briefing the composers and having that back and forth and constructing it and being quite precise, especially in comedy. You have to hit those beats, and I'm a great lover of the Tom and Jerry approach, where I've worked out all the beats, and you compose to those beats. And I tell you, when you can just pull back, I don't believe in a, not for comedy. Obviously, there are shows where it does work, of having a constant bed of music. But I'm a great believer in, you have the highs and lows. You have to know when to just drop out and have silence, and let that beat stand on its own.
How much are you putting of that into the animatic when the characters walked off the door? How much of that do you try to put in the animatic? I mean, obviously, your description of a review process where people are asking questions, why is that happening? I don't understand that. When you perhaps got it planned in your head.
I try and put as much as possible in terms of reference, and good editors that we work with will usually put temp music in, temp sound effects, um, because they know what I'm looking for, and they will bring that in, and they know that there is a review process, and we will have to get it passed. But it's also a good reference to the animators. This music is going to be leading up to that. And so they can play to the mood, and they can play to the timing of when the music stops and when that sound effect is going to come in, that they can play the reaction. When you construct the animatic in black and white in a very basic way, you are constructing the show, and everything else is gravy, cream, and a cherry on top, and you are finessing it. But you've got, yeah, it sounds disgusting, but it works. That is the key stage, and that's where the comedy is. If you're not getting the comedy, then at that point, no, that gag is not going to work. You can plus it in animation, but you have to land the gags. You have to land the humor. That's coming back to what we're talking about. You have to land the humor in the animatic, and the animators can add to that. If you want to add another gag, please do. If you want to push it further, yeah, go for it, go nuts. But you have to have that humor. If you're relying further down the line, is that, oh, we can fix it in edit, but there's only so much you can fix in edit. I like to nail all the humor down or as much as possible in the animatic at the earliest possible stage.
I mean, one thing I would say, one slight difference between, and I've worked on both 2D shows like you and 3D CGI shows. Um, I would argue and say you can tweak the timing a little bit in 2D more than you can 3D at that later
Yeah.
stage.
Oh
So,
god, yeah. Yeah.
so you can do a kind of very fine cut on the 2D in a way that's not possible in 3D generally. I mean, I think that's a lot to do with the way that 2D doesn't generally put something on every frame. That old phrase, it would be on twos, and you haven't got every frame moving like you might have on a CGI show. So you can get in there, you can sort of cut and paste frames, and I've found sometimes that is with comedy that is useful to be able to do. You think, oh, I could just do that look for another two or three,
Mm,
and it's one of those things. And sometimes you can go back into animation and fix it, or you think, no, I can get in here in the edit and I can just copy and paste those couple of frames, and it just gives me that read that I need for the audience to understand, oh, he's seen that, or whatever it is to set it up.
yeah. But again, that leads back to the importance of timing. With this, it's either funny, and it's not, you're coming in too soon, or you're leaving it far too late. You're going full Family Guy, and you're waiting a minute on someone just standing there blinking. You go, oh my god, how it's what you feel comfortable with, and it is. And I think you either understand timing, or you don't. And it's good to be able to sit with someone and say, okay, and we are coming in now. That's the perfect spot, and that's our responsibility to make sure that we work with the editor, but we get our personal timing.
Well, I like working with we for anybody listening, we share an editor. We have worked with the same editor over the years many times.
Yes,
um,
but
uh,
there other editors are available
other
and
editors
are
who are,
fantastic.
equally
Yes.
fantastic as well. Absolutely. I think again, whilst working remotely is a fantastic thing, it's a brilliant tool that we've now got. Equally, I feel sometimes being in the room with somebody is also very useful. A little while ago you described about working with executives and producers and actually reviewing something. I quite enjoyed, I can't believe I say this, I quite enjoyed reviewing things with the executive team there, not because, I was thinking I'm going to be faced with a whole bunch of notes I've now got to, go through and resolve and find a way of making working. But actually there was that moment when something is funny, if you're in the room and you see somebody laugh, and
Mm,
they laugh
yeah.
at the right moment or at the right thing, and you think, oh great, that works. Or if they come back and say, do you know what, I think that could be funny, but it needs more time here in the animatic, or it needs, or you need another drawing or whatever it is to actually make it function and work. So I think that process is also very useful when you're dealing with comedy, is actually trying to work with people directly so that you gauge their reactions. I know there was a story of, from, I think, from his books, that Chuck Jones liked to sneak into the theaters and, watch his films with the audience so that you could see that, they were laughing at the right places. And I've been very fortunate to go and work on shows where they actually do sort of screenings with test audiences and see all that function. That's a very interesting. It's a, it can be quite hard as an individual when you're watching something that
Yeah.
you worked on for perhaps a year being, examined in such detail. But equally, it can be a very useful thing engaging what is actually working, and things like timing. You're learning from that process.
I have to touch on this briefly, is the boundaries to comedy, which is knowing what your age demographic is for the show that you're making. Also, cultural issues with when things go international. Oh my goodness, you can fall foul of fall foul of in so many ways that you have to be very aware of. And getting to the end of a series, and they say, we can't show that episode in all of these countries. You go, all right, okay, I fully understand. Yeah, but it is funny, isn't it? So yeah, these countries will not find that funny. They'll find the rest of it funny, but yeah. And in terms of health and safety, we've both worked for uh, public public broadcasters where we've had some strange conversations. The strangest conversation about health and safety for me was, I'm not sure we can have this gag because we have to discuss whether the boy who is riding a pig, who is riding on a skateboard going down a school corridor, does he have to wear a safety helmet, or is it because he's indoors on a pig on a skateboard? Is that safe? We said,
Well, you're going to tell me
right,
the pig
okay.
needed to wear a safety
Oh,
helmet.
it was for both of them. It was for the boy and the pig, because the pig was on that, and you go, right, can we just step back from this and say, if someone is actually going to imitate this, imitable behavior is it's a bugbear of a lot of excellent gags that we put in. I say, no, imitable behavior, some kid is going to try this. It's, if they're in that particular end of the gene pool, would he be that bad? But no, we can't. Okay, that's me. That's me. That's the sort of person I am.
The whole thing, I think it's quite difficult because I've certainly, my experience recently has been that actually this different world that we're in now, where you've got terrestrial broadcasters who are often confined to government type legislation in terms of how they broadcast, what they broadcast, their responsibilities. I mean, for example, in the United Kingdom, we have Ofcom, who actually have a set of rules that you have to look at. I think from that perspective, you've got that particular mode of operation.
Mm,
And then you've got the streamers that are working totally internationally and don't seem to have the same governance or
no.
they don't have to answer to people in the same way. And, when you watch, some of the streamers, they just have sort of little indications in the top left-hand corner what you might actually perceive and see here, and a sort of a
Mm,
gentle warning that there might be scenes that are graphic or whatever it is. That's the limit of what they need to do. So they they have a different approach, and certainly my experience has been that they were perhaps more open to doing things that I found that traditional, terrestrial type broadcasters and satellite
Hmm.
broadcasters weren't prepared to do, because
Yeah,
they
they're
were they were
balked at. Yeah.
because they were governed by different rule sets, both, like say in the UK and other places.
It's slightly the Wild West with streamers, but we just have to know what's right for the sensibility of the audience.
And you use your previous experiences to actually determine. You think, I'm always kind of self-editing. I know where I might be sort of, bending the rules rather than just breaking them, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
wow. Uh, this is such a huge. I realise that we've missed out so many aspects of comedy and shock and so many things and sight gags of stills and just dropping stills in that are disgusting and gross out humour and things like that, and where we can go. It is a massive subject that hopefully we've covered quite quite well, moderately well, as well as we can within the time within a human span of existence.
I'm
Yeah.
sure there's scope for us to go back again and do some of this in it.
Scope for be very particular.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Go on. I was going to say, can you give a recommendation for a couple of films or shows that you personally always always rely on for a good laugh that you admire?
Oh, for a good laugh, I would personally, because I think there's a lot of comedians and there's a lot of comedy that owes an awful lot to Jacques Tati. I would, if you've not watched the Jacques Tati film, I would certainly recommend Jour de Fête, which is the first feature film that he made, which is about the postie Francois and his little life around a French village. There's so many visual gags in there, so much humor. A lot of it's very gently paced, but I think if you're looking at visual humor, it's a great place to start. I would thoroughly
Mm,
recommend that. How about you? Is there something that you
yeah.
would?
I am I love going back to the very basics. Although I brought them up, I could watch Laurel and Hardy all day, every day, because the setups, the timing, the construction of everything, the construction of the humor and the breaking the fourth wall. Sorry, and the characters, you know what the characters are, and you can break out of that. But there are so many elements of their humor that I will bring in all the time during all my work. And they're like in recent times, not that recent, the Emperor's New Groove, the Disney film that started off as very serious, very earnest study of the Inca Aztec empire, and yeah, we've got very very poor audience reactions. And I said, right, we're going back and we're going to reboot this as a comedy, and it's for me, it's probably the funniest film that Disney has put out because they played most of it for laughs, and the timing in that, the performances are just top notch, absolutely top notch. Everyone was at the top of their game for that. But the series series, I would go for something like Ren and Stimpy from the 90s, things like that, which are so, and Cow and Chicken, which is so bizarre. I do love a little bit of the bizarre, and I brought on my two oldest kids watching things like that. A sense of the ridiculous is something that I always try and bring in.
Well, that's a very good point to leave it. So
Yes.
that's ridiculous. So next time, what makes a director? I believe it's angst and coffee. But anyway, I'm sure there's more to
I,
it than
I was going
that.
to say a big bucket of really strange body parts. You just sort of put into a mixer, and angst and coffee. Yes,
Angst
all
and
of those
coffee.
things.
And yeah, if you've enjoyed this, and you would like to support the channel and the podcast, please like and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts from. And just a reminder, We're not saving lives.
It's just a cartoon.
Goodbye.
See you next time. Bye.